Hello everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Gorilla Whale, a Godzilla watch-along podcast. I am your kaiju consultant, Kevin Carpenter.
And I am the hungover flight attendant on the way back from Jurassic Park. I mean, Monsterland.
Monsterland is so funny, one, because that's a very funny name. That sounds like a kid-friendly amusement park. But also, I think they're going to change it to Monster Island in later films. But here's the thing, all right? We're going to have more films after this. Now, Destroy All Monsters was created to be the end of the Godzilla franchise. And then it made some money. And then there were, like, literally the next year, they were like, let's make another Godzilla real quick. Get it out there. So it's definitely a tonal whiplash watching this movie and then the next movie that we're going to be talking about. Also for a lot of other tone reasons. But yeah, so the other weird thing is that within the timeline, Destroy All Monsters takes place at the turn of the 20th century, so the far-off future year of 1999. And then when we come back to Godzilla, all of those movies will be in, like, the modern day of when, like, the movie came out. So we're going to be jumping around the timeline here. This is, canonically, timeline-wise, the end of the Showa era. In terms, even though we're going to have like 6 or 7 more Showa movies to talk about after this one.
It's set in the far future of, what was it, 1999?
1999.
Yeah, hilarious. I love movies that take place in the future that is in the past for us now. When Blade Runner finally crossed that event, that was exciting for me. But yeah, I wish Michael Crichton was alive so that I could send him a tweet or something like that and be like, hi, did you watch Destroy All Monsters when you were a child? Because it was startlingly similar to Jurassic Park in a lot of ways, including, now I actually haven't read the novel yet. It's been on my list though. At the very end, there's even, like, the helicopter, like, everybody's in the helicopter over the island with these big sweeping views of the creatures on the island. And I was like, this is Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's in the novel, but it's in Spielberg's film, which I do love and adore.
Well, another thing is that Monsterland is like Jurassic Park in that they're keeping all the kaiju there. But in later Showa movies, Monster Island is just going to be, this is the island where the kaiju hang out. We don't have all of the top-notch security and alarms and magnetic fields to keep them there. They just live there.
It is also interesting that this movie, because I keep calling it Jurassic Park, but notably, it is also, there's a lot of plot lines in here that are in the Jurassic World films.
Oh, yeah.
Which I have seen all of them. Of, like, the monsters getting out and being weaponized, which finally, kaiju weaponization, back at it again. Still not quite the whole, like, you know, Frankenstein. Well, I mean, it's not, they're not going full tilt creating the kaiju the way that, you know, like the scientists, like, recreate the dinosaurs or whatever, or my proposed plot rewrite of Ibera Horror of the Deep. But yeah, I mean, I want to start off by saying I liked this one. It was nice to see Honda back at the reins, and it was nice to see a film that made sense, was coherent, was well made, etc., etc. We love to see it. They had cash this time, I think. They had cash and maybe some time.
They had a little bit more cash and a little bit more time because, as I said, this was meant to be the end of the Godzilla franchise. So let's get into the details of that real quick.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. So I'm just going to lift a paragraph from Japan's Favorite Monstar, the unauthorized biography of the Big G here, because I think it kind of really accurately surmises the situation that this movie was coming out in, the Avengers Endgame of the Godzilla.
Oh my god, it is the Avengers Endgame, because it kept going.
The Avengers Endgame of the Godzilla franchise, and then it kept going.
Well, listen, Marvel was always going to keep going. That's how comics work. Go ahead, Kevin. Let's tell the people the histories.
As the 1960s began drawing to a close, Toho's once booming science fiction movies were slowly but surely fading from view. Son of Godzilla attracted less than 2.5 million ticket buyers during its Japanese theatrical run, the lowest attendance of any Godzilla film, and the 2 most recent Godzillas had failed to get a theatrical release in the US, signaling the waning of the genre's popularity abroad. The Toho brass sensed their mightiest monster was slipping into a creative and commercial void. Quote, they were going to end the Godzilla series then, SFX director Teisho Arikawa recalled in Godzilla Days. Producer Tomoyuki Tanaka figured that all the ideas had just run out. End quote, end quote. So, to give the series one last hurrah, this is Kevin speaking, by the way. I'm no longer quoting the book. That's why I did the double end quotes. To give the series one last hurrah, director Ishiro Honda was brought back. His mission, given to him by the Toho higher-ups, was simple. Quote, show all of the monsters. End quote. And so, new suits were made for Godzilla and returning kaiju Anguirus, while all other costumes are dredged out of storage and modified. It doesn't matter if the monsters were viciously killed on screen, they're back, baby. It's 1968, and it's time to destroy all monsters.
Which they did not do.
They did not destroy all the monsters.
Spoiler, they destroyed a singular one.
They got one.
One.
The other thing, by the way, is the corralling of the suits behind the scenes was extra difficult because they would loan out these suits to the Ultraman TV show.
Oh.
And I'm talking like Godzilla suits, the Baragon suit, the Rodan suit, like all of these different suits were loaned out to Ultraman, and then they would be modified to be like the latest monster of the week. Mm-hmm. And this was also going on in the background during like the filming of the rest of these movies as well. They would, like loan out a Godzilla, and then they would modify it to be a monster, and then they would bring it back to shoot like the water scenes in the Godzilla movie or something like that. But yeah, it's so funny because like they tried to get all of the monsters in this movie, and then some of them, like Baragon, like the suit was old and they were worried about like the ears. So Baragon's just kind of in the background just enough to justify them being on the poster. Mm-hmm. And then Varan, the suit was just completely destroyed. So they had to make like a little mini and then just kind of show Varan off in the background as well, doing absolutely nothing.
I mean, we can't all be A-listers here, And was the objective? The objective at no point in time even was like destroy all monsters. No. It's not like the global government. Which, it's always interesting how these, like, Cold War era films sort of have this, like, idea of a global government in the far future with the UN kind of a thing. I feel like this has fallen out of favor a little bit in modern science fiction. I feel like we don't see global government as much. I could be wrong, though. But their objective was never destroy all monsters. They were always like, we gotta fight the aliens. It was never about, like, oh, I guess we need to annihilate all of the kaiju or face our own annihilation. But, it's just the title.
Yeah, I think when they were planning
it doesn't need to have any bearing on the plot.
When they were planning the title, I think they started with all monsters, and then they were just like, all right, so how do we bring this all together? Gather all monsters? No. Assemble all monsters? We can't do that yet. They
should have just called it Monsterland.
Yeah, but like I said, Monsterland sounds like a kid-friendly amusement park. Age of Monsters sounds fun, but...
Yeah, like Age of Ultron, and it was really like 5 minutes of Ultron.
We keep coming back to Avengers in this conversation. It is amazing.
It's just that, I just think that the MCU is kind of a good sort of comparison point for the Godzilla universe in many ways, considering it's like, they're both at the, they were... for their these were the contemporary science fiction blockbusters.
Yeah,
they were the most popular in their respective categories, like some of the most popular science fiction franchise blockbusters, and they had a great influence on the film industry from like their success. And there was, what are their missteps for sure, like there's just a lot to pick there.
It's also interesting because this movie creates an even larger cinematic universe for Godzilla. Mm-hmm. Because we talked about how Mothra came from her own movie and Rodan came from his own movie, and then they came together in the same Godzilla world and Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. But with this movie, we now have Gorosaurus from King Kong Escapes, and Manda from Atragon, and Varan, and Baragon, and all of these different like monsters coming together. So it's like, oh, okay, so all of these different movies are now also part of the Godzilla world.
Yes.
And even the Godzilla movies themselves don't keep track of canon that well.
Yeah, it's kind of like when... Did you see Deadpool versus Wolverine?
Of course I saw Deadpool versus Wolverine.
Yeah, it's like when Elektra showed up.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh.
By the way, spoilers for Deadpool versus Wolverine audience.
It's by the time this comes out, I don't think Deadpool versus Wolverine will even be in theaters anymore.
Probably not, but still.
The internet has already spoiled all of this film all over the place.
Fair enough.
As soon as I said, have you seen Deadpool versus Wolverine? Anybody that hasn't, they've skipped ahead. And now you're at the point where we've stopped talking about Deadpool versus Wolverine.
Yeah, now we're going to talk more about Destroy All Monsters. Let's get into the summary. It's the turn of the millennium, the far-off future year of 1999. The United Nations has become an organizational powerhouse. Not only have they pioneered advancements in aquaculture, genetic engineering, and space travel, they have also captured all of the kaiju on an island known as Monsterland, and keep them there with a variety of safeguards, including magnetic fields and gas-spewing buoys. Real quick, I know I'm in the summary. We need to have a Mothra conversation. Do we have that now or later?
Is this about the fact that they won't let her be a fucking moth anymore?
No, I'm talking about Mothra also being held captive on Monsterland.
Oh, yeah, that is, well, I feel like this is infringing on people's religions.
Well, yeah.
What did the people... Infant Island is not mentioned at all.
No.
Have the UN completely, overruled the people of Infant Island? They've stolen their... I mean, geez, this is the metaphors that you could make about this. The lines that you can connect about taking something sacred from these people and penning it up like a monster. It's and
an intelligent creature. Like these past few movies, the movies have taught us to have sympathy for these creatures. And now not only are they being held captive on an island they don't want to be on, but also Mothra is an intelligent creature that is the deity of the Infant Islanders. The Infant Islanders are not mentioned in this movie. So
not mentioned at all.
They're not mentioned at all.
You can also argue that Mothra being like a god, and Mothra has never attacked without explicit provocation. Mothra's sentience and, for lack of a better term, morality is perhaps the most, what's the word I want to use? Acceptable by human standards. I understand penning up the rest of the monsters and sort of trying to keep them in this wild habitat where they have, free, we're not killing them, but these monsters do attack without provocation and cause a lot of damage to human life. So it makes sense to me that the government would be like, we need to keep these guys contained, but that, kaiju rights activists are like, well, you can't just put them down. Even though, yeah,
the whole thing about the
Jurassic
kaiju rights activists. Godzilla destroys Tokyo, and there's an activist group being like, okay, but he's still a wild creature, guys. We can't just kill him.
I'm telling you, you need to read John Scalzi's Kaiju Preservation Society. I'm shocked every day that you haven't.
I'll look into it. Sounds good.
But the thing that killed me in the Jurassic World movies is everybody's like, we have to preserve the once it became clear that the dinosaurs are listen, every time you put people with the dinosaurs, they're gonna kill each other. And now the island in the second film, the island is blowing up at the volcano, and they're we got to evacuate the dinosaurs. And listen, I understand that there is scientific purpose behind the dinosaurs and scientific research, but when people were we gotta let them loose, free range dinosaurs, this is their planet too, I was like, are you fucking insane? We've not evolved to live with these guys. They're ginormous. They'll kill and eat us.
Godzilla is destroying the whale population.
Absolutely. He's causing all sorts of ecological damage, probably.
I think we also see Rodan eat a dolphin or an orca. There's a point where Rodan flies into the water and eats just a big sea animal.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back and forth on, I suppose, humanity's like whether we have a greater right to life than any other creature on the planet. That's a very interesting philosophical conversation. That's a whole other separate podcast.
Well, actually, no, we're going to hit that on this podcast because some of the MonsterVerse movies go into that. I shit you not.
Well, yeah. I'm sure they do. I'm like, Mothra is the one where I'm like, you shouldn't have penned her up. Like, it makes sense to pen everybody up and contain everybody else. Keep them alive. Like, you're not killing them, so you're keeping them alive. They're in this, like, free-range island. Presumably, I mean, whether or not they have enough space, actually, and clearly they're not having territorial disputes. They do seem to all be relatively social enough to coexist. But Mothra being penned up with them does seem like it is, if nothing else, a religious infringement upon the peoples of Infant Island, if not like actual imprisonment. You know, I mean, and that's when we need to get into like the kaiju people as people rights kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. But like I said, it makes sense to me that everybody else is pinned up because everybody else is incredibly dangerous to the rest of the world, but Mothra isn't.
And it's like they did a press tour. The Twin Fairies
did a press
tour talking about how they're the Infant
Mothra.
Islanders and Mothra is their god and they're totally fine as long as you guys don't steal her eggs. And also, there were 2 Mothras, but then the one died off screen. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. And you're right. I am also a little bit pissed that we don't have Mothra in her moth form. She is once again Larva Mothra, and I don't get why these movies... I mean, I get it. It's because they don't want too many flying kaiju on the screen at the same time.
No. Because listen, Kevin, this was supposed to be the last one.
You're right.
Could you imagine if this was the last one and we didn't get any more Mothra and that bitch was in Caterpie mode for the last film?
I'd be mad.
Unacceptable.
I'd be mad.
That's the biggest flaw in this movie. And I will never forgive you fully for that one, Ishiro Honda. As much as I love your other work, not letting Mothra be Mothra in what was intended to be the final kaiju film, disgraceful. Otherwise, though, I did really like the picture.
Yeah, they spend this time, showing off the safeguards on Monsterland of like, here's how we kept all these kaiju here. But it really comes off as like, none of these kaiju want to be here. And even Mothra tries to like get off the island and then she's like trapped there by like the gas spewing buoys. She's a larva, so she can't fly off. But also if she was Mothra, she wouldn't be able to fly off either because Rodan gets hit by like the magnetic fields. It makes me feel bad from like the beginning of this movie.
Yeah.
And it's really bad that Mothra is there because that means that the Infant Islanders, best case scenario, the UN just took Mothra and now the Infant Islanders are on their island no longer having their prayers answered by their moth god. And worst case scenario is something I don't even want to say out loud.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you have to explore the option of like, well, what would happen if Mothra wasn't on the island? How do we get Mothra into this film? And it's very simple. Like, Mothra was chilling, being super low-key on Infant Island, staying in her lane, moisturized, minding her own business. And the alien people, like, didn't realize that Mothra is there. And then Mothra bursts out to, like, gets a big damn hero's moment to come and, like, help.
Yeah.
Like, defeat the controlled kaiju that are attacking, like, the different cities and stuff, and, like, Mothra's on. Once again, Mothra is pretty much always, like, actually on humanity's side and is only standing on business when evil capitalist businessmen are trying to exploit her people and herself and her fairy priestesses for profit against their consent. Like,
yeah, to be fair, Mothra is not always on humanity's side. Mothra is on her human side. So.
Yeah. But I mean, all of that to state, like, it's like when I say Mothra is like on humanity's side, Mothra isn't like interested in destroying the Earth or humanity, like,
no,
or anything like that. I think that Mothra she's essentially like a liaison in many ways between humanity and like the kaiju. And I think she should have been like their union rep here, rolling up, being like, these aliens, they're exploiting you too. Mm-hmm. I understand that you didn't care to be imprisoned. What the fuck is the food? I'm now thinking about like, Do they have to truck in food to Monster Island? Because there's no way that it can sustain that many giant monsters, right? Anyway.
Now I'm just imagining like one of the helicopters comes down, they just start throwing cows on the island.
Do you remember that scene in Jurassic World where they just like dangled the shark over the pit, like the water, and then the giant...
Oh, yeah.
That big sea monster came up and snapped it?
God.
Oh, that was so good.
So funny.
And then later on, when like the assistant, Katie McGraw's character gets like got by the pteranodons.
Just this weirdly horrible death for this character that did nothing in the narrative. It was so...
Well, here's the thing.
We need to stop talking about Jurassic World because now I'm thinking like, what if they make a Godzilla movie with Chris Pratt? And I can't think about that for too long.
Okay.
So... Back to the summary, because we spent most of our time already talking about Mothra, which was important.
You started this.
Fair enough. So, all the kaiju are on Monsterland against their will. But it seems to be a peaceful age for humanity. But then, mysterious gas fills the research center underneath Monsterland, and all communication is shut off. Then, all of the kaiju attack major cities across the globe. Godzilla attacks New York, Rodan destroys the Kremlin, and Larva Mothra destroys a train in Beijing. Other monsters, like Gorosaurus from King Kong Escapes, attack Paris, while Manda the giant serpent from Atragon attacks London. I think it's Atragon, actually. Don't quote me about my pronunciations, people, or do in the comments. We love the engagement. Dr. Yoshida of the United Nations calls the astronauts on their moon base to investigate. Leading the charge is Captain Yamabe, who takes his crew into the spaceship Moonlight SY-3 and flies to Monsterland. Within the research station, they find the scientists of Monsterland completely unharmed, including lead scientist Dr. Otani and Captain Yamabe's sister Kyoko. However, it is soon revealed the scientists are being mind-controlled by a race of aliens known as the Kilax. The Kilax appear to be gorgeous women wearing sparkling silver hoods. The Kilax have taken over all of the kaiju, and they threaten to continue their global rampage until the Earth surrenders to them. Captain Yamabe refuses, and he and his crew fight their way out of the research base and take Dr. Otani with them. Later on, Yamabe and Dr. Yoshida interrogate the mind-controlled Dr. Otani for any info on the Kilax. But during a distracted moment, Dr. Otani hurls himself out of a window and kills himself. Midway through the fall, he is replaced by a mannequin that we spend way too much time focusing on before it hits the ground. Gotta love the 60s.
This was quite startling. I was like, oh, he just killed himself. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean... Suicides like that are often abrupt in films. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't often see it coming. Like, there's a lot of... People love to get a lot of shock value out of suicides. And especially when you have, like, kind of a... I mean, this is a Cold War era movie with, like, foreign spies compelling people to be double agents and, whatnot. So somebody offing themselves suddenly happens a lot in these movies rather than, like, be captured or interrogated or whatever. But yeah, I did not expect somebody to jump out a window in a Godzilla movie, I have to say.
Yeah. And it's like like the shot is him jumping out the window, and then it's a shot of a mannequin, like very clearly a mannequin, like being thrown off of the seaside cliff, and then the shot of like him hitting the ground. And it's like, you could have just kept the shot of him jumping out the window and that would have been so much better. But also, I do love the mannequin, so there's that. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, come on. This is, again, cheesy effects and replacing with mannequins and dolls and models. That's what these movies are all about.
A mind-controlled Kyoko, who looks so fashionable right now. She's wearing like a white dress with gold trimmings and gold high...
She is serving.
Yeah, she's wearing gold high heels on a wet beach. Damn. Anyway...
This entire movie, she's so put together.
No, that's the thing. It's not the entire movie, and that sucks. But we'll get to that. So, anyway, the mind-controlled Kyoko and some more mind-controlled humans attempt to take away Dr. Otani's body, but a squad of United Nations Special Forces fire at them and drive them off. our heroes perform an autopsy on Dr. Otani and discover the mind-controlled device that was implanted behind his ear. The Kilax have now created an underground base near Mount Fuji. They direct Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and Manda to destroy Tokyo, and they absolutely demolish it. The Kilax also send Kyoko to walk into the United Nations and give them another ultimatum. Considering that she came into enemy territory with 0 guards, they instead capture her and rip out her mind control device, which is apparently a lot easier to do with your bare hand. It looks like he's taking off her earrings.
I think the mind control device are in her ear, because there's a whole thing where before all of that happens, there's this whole thing where they're like, the news broadcasts the scientists that have like turned traitor, and they're like, here are their mugshots, like please turn them in, the world's most wanted. And we see people stationed at like a subway exit examining women that come through to see if they have the implant, if they are the spy, if they're the scientist on TV. And they examine her, and she doesn't have the little bump behind her ear. So they're like, oh, yeah, you can go. And I'm like, he's sitting here like, oh my God, she's not being mind controlled. She's totally like with it. Like either she's been brainwashed or radicalized or like whatever. No, it's fucking earrings. It's just that her transmitter is on these earrings that she never takes off, I guess. Which, I mean, you could do. It's not super hygienic.
Kyoko is such a missed opportunity, though, because she's now free.
I would have been so much...
She's now free, but she has no memory of her time with the Kilax, and she instantly becomes a much less interesting character.
Yeah.
When, 3 scenes ago, Godzilla and Rodan and Mothra and Manda are destroying Tokyo, and then it cuts to her standing on a rooftop watching all the destruction while wearing just the most fashionable clothing, and she looks at the camera and smiles evilly, and this is great. This is an awesome villain. This mind-controlled femme fatale. And then halfway through the movie they just take the mind control away from her, and then she's just nothing.
That's the thing. It's much less interesting because she's mind controlled.
You're right.
We didn't realize until the ear. Like I said, when I saw that she passed muster because she didn't have the transmitter implanted in her skin, my conclusion was, oh, she doesn't have a transmitter. She's doing this of her own, either of her own volition or willingly enough that she doesn't need to be mind controlled, which means that they could have something else on her that has garnered her cooperation. And I mean, from there, you can do stuff like she's a triple agent or she's deep undercover, perhaps, which wouldn't make, I mean, the whole scene where she's smiling at the destruction of the cities of the world or whatever, that'd be just a scene to trick the audience if she actually was deep undercover, etc. But it is absolutely a missed opportunity. I think her being not mind controlled would have been far more interesting.
Yeah. I think we also lose a central villain here. We have the Kilax, but these previous scenes kind of set Kyoko up as sort of the front-facing villain, the villain with the personality, the human villain. And then she loses her mind control earrings, and she fades from the narrative. And it's all right, now we just have the Kilax, who also become less interesting as the movie progresses.
Was the whole thing all the Kilax all appeared to be women?
Yeah.
And then Kyoko is a woman, and she's kind of the lead, in many ways kind of presented to be the lead. This feels like an interesting, a strange sort of connection to Invasion of Astro Monster, where all
this whole movie is just a less interesting Invasion of Astro Monster, which is a damning critique.
Well, okay, I mean, the motivation of the villains or whatever wasn't great. There was a lot of other good stuff that was going on.
At least the Zillions had menace.
Well, yeah, they did. And it was...
And sexism.
But I mean, it's kind of interesting because, the Zillions, it was, all these guys, and then they had, a handful of female aliens that all looked the same. And then now our main villains are these, female aliens that are kind of at the forefront. But then, one of them was being mind controlled, so she actually doesn't have, any agency. And then the other one, their motivations basically seem to be they want this living metal that they've discovered.
Well,
But it's a far less interesting motive than like, we need water.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of water.
The Zillions are like, first off, I want to retract my previous statement. I think Destroy All Monsters does have more exciting stuff than Invasion of Astro Monster, but it does follow a lot of the same plot beats as Invasion of Astro Monster, just in less interesting ways. But like, yeah, the Zillions are like, we want water, and we are going to send a global radio broadcast that we are now declaring war on Earth. Meanwhile, the Zillions are like, all right, we have taken over the kaiju, they're rampaging over the planet, and we are doing this to bring Earth to the table for peace talks, gun to their head. And it seems like their main motivation is just kind of taking over underground areas that are near volcanoes where no humans are residing.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the Kilax could have gotten this from coming to the table. Like, they could have just come to Earth and been like, we're the Kilax, we have advanced technology, and we want to live in the places where humans aren't.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, there's no examination on why it seems that we've gone immediately to violence here, because it does seem like the easiest and most logical conclusion here would be, hi, we have super advanced technology. You have a habitable region / resource that we would like. Tradesies?
Yeah.
Like, it would be one, like, if we had just kind of gotten a little scene on why they didn't do that. If it was something where it was like, no, they actually, like, or why it couldn't have just been, we want this planet now, it's ours. Like,
yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like the Zillions are just straight up like, we want to conquer you. We're bad dudes.
Yeah.
And we're also sexist.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, too, is like Kyoko could have been like a secret Kilak. I was about to say Zillion. But just like in Invasion of Astro Monster, they have the one lady who's secretly a Zillion, and then she turns against them and then gets vaporized. Like with Kyoko, she would have been a much more interesting villain if she was like secretly a Kilak or something along those lines. But making her this mind-controlled victim with a bunch of personality and then deleting all of that personality as soon as she's not mind-controlled is lame.
Well, it's also because, again, it's still the 1960s. We've said it before. We'll say it again. It's a Cold War era film.
Yeah.
Dealing with, like, a foreign power meaning to exert control over our heroes. Like, to have a character that was a spy that has become indoctrinated by these foreign enemies and is, like, selling out their country, planet, like, that totally fits with, like, anxieties surrounding, capitalism versus communism, America versus Russia, the East versus the West. Like, there's so much, 1960s, this is post-Korean War, Vietnam is happening. Like, there's really a lot of, like, interesting things that this film can be doing with, like, allegory and the examination even of, like, what if these people wanted what if this was just a little bit more complicated? What if not complicated, complex. Like, what if what these aliens wanted? What if the Kilax wanted something that seemed, from their perspective, reasonable? And from the Earth's perspective, humanity's perspective, obviously it's not reasonable. But some of the humans do think it's like, because that's what they did with the Invasion of Astro Monster, is they did have one person, one of the Planet X, the Zillions, be like, actually, no, this is wrong, whatever, etc. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, it just seems like this could have been more in depth if they had just added a little bit of complexity to it by changing kind of like the motivation of the Kilax. You didn't really have to change a lot of the plot. Just kind of change, like, why they're doing what they're doing, because their motivation is kind of muddy. It's like they're just evil, Yeah. And, these hot, sexy women are just evil and they want to dominate for no discernible reason. Okay. Yeah, that's 1960 sci-fi, I guess, you fucking nerds.
And they're not even hot, sexy women. Let me get into this real quick. The United Nations eventually discover small devices hidden across the globe that act as radio transponders for the Kilax mind control. They trace the signal to a facility on the moon, and Captain Yamabe and his crew fly back to destroy it. After some gunfights and a weirdly long scene with a laser drill, Yamabe's crew destroy the main transponder and the base's environment control. The Kilax revert from beautiful women to weird stone slugs, revealing their weakness to cold.
Yeah, that was also
so disappointing.
Oh yes, that was the living metal thing. They were living they're a living metal that can look like hot humans in volcanic temperatures, except when they get cold they revert back to living metal. Which, I mean, the concept of like a quote unquote living metal, totally like an interesting science fiction proposal. I mean, that's fine. You know, I can accept that. It's the motivations thing that's really killing me. I can totally accept this weird ass, like, they look like humans and then they don't. So, you know, it feels like there's a lot to unpack here.
I think you could do an interesting reveal with, like, these aliens that look like humans were actually doing, like, weird hypnosis to make them look like hot human women. But their reveal as these, like, tiny stone slugs is just...
They're just, like, hot because it's fucking TV. I mean, it's a Hollywood. It's movies. Like, I do feel like there is something to say here because retro science fiction especially... Well, science fiction in general does have a bit of a woman problem. And there's, like, there are interesting things all of the time to unpack about what this genre, which is dominated by men, and I mean, here's your fucking rage bait. What the fuck is wrong with nerdy men sometimes? Not all nerdy men.
A topic no one has dared to acknowledge yet.
No one has dared to acknowledge the misogyny in science fiction, but I, a woman, am bravely speaking out.
Justice for Mothra.
Justice for Mothra. She has been imprisoned for no reason. What are her crimes? 2, the Planet X zillions. Why are all of the women look the same? Why are they all played by the same actress? They all look the same, but all of the men are different. This is weird. 3, what the fuck is up with these evil women mind-controlling men to suicide?
Well, that's just women.
I mean, like, you see what I'm saying here? Like, I'm not saying, and here's the thing, to be clear, to anybody that's about to get in the comments, sure, engagement, great. I feel like these things are not, like, maybe it is, quote unquote, too deep, but it does kind of feel like these are sort of, like, unconscious, like, little things that just kind of add up and are like, it just kind of feels weird. Because, again, these aliens don't have as good of a motive as the Planet X zillions. What's the difference? What's the difference? These are women who are actually, like, not hot women. They're betrayal. She takes off her makeup and she's an ugly slug. Like, you know what? Like, I'm not pulling anything completely out of my ass here.
Take them to the pool on the first date, men. You'll see that they're a weird stone slug trying to take your underground land.
Like, it does feel a little weird here.
Yeah.
That... I'm just saying, it's just a little, like, off.
So with the reveal that they're stone slugs and the destruction of their moon base, which is separate from the human moon base. The humans had a moon base at the beginning of this movie, and then it turns out the Kilax also have a moon base that we didn't know about, which is very funny to me.
The moon is not large. I feel like that should have been something that the moon base humans were slacking.
Well, the Kilax are also incredibly fast at creating underground bases because they also create one at Mount Fuji in a matter of, like, hours.
It's
just like, oh shit, the Kilax have a new moon base. Have a new base at Mount Fuji.
Maybe they have, like, a 3D printer or something. It's 1999, Kevin. The technology is really quite incredible.
They could have brought that to the table for the peace talks, but no, they went straight to mind-controlling kaiju. Whatever. So...
Well, you know.
Women.
These domineering women. I don't care. I wouldn't care if they had, like, a motive.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's the fact that they don't have, like, a very good motive that makes me pick it apart.
Well, God, speaking of lack of agency, the Kilax are no longer mind-controlling the kaiju. So instead, the United Nations mind-control the kaiju. They're under our control now.
Wasn't this the plot of the last movie?
Son of Godzilla?
No, there was a couple movies ago. No, right, no, it was still Invasion of Astro Monster.
Yeah,
fuck.
So Invasion of Astro Monster, they bring Godzilla and Rodan to Planet X, and they're not mind controlled when they fight the mind controlled King Ghidorah. But then they're mind controlled, and then afterward they break the mind control, and then Godzilla and Rodan just fight King Ghidorah because they hate that guy. In this movie, though, they keep the mind control on the kaiju, so the United Nations now have an army of giant monsters that are completely under their control. No ethical ramifications there, including a god.
We could do something cool with this if they would have done something cool with this. You know, I saw one post on, I think it was on Tumblr or something, that was like, Star Wars fans are always like, oh man, Star Wars would be so good if Star Wars was good. This is me. Right. Like, the implications of this global government having complete control over the kaiju, we're not going to do nothing with that.
Yeah. No, we're not going to touch that.
Just like we're not doing nothing with this foreign power coming in and implanting spies to do terrorist activities against the zoos and release the monsters.
But that's the thing. It's the future year of 1999. The United Nations is an incredibly effective, incredibly well-organized global powerhouse that everyone trusts. They have a base on the moon.
So it's the complete opposite of the United Nations, which is an ineffective global sock puppet that nobody respects and does nothing ever. And you can quote me on that.
So all of the kaiju are directed to Mount Fuji by the incredibly effective United Nations, including Godzilla, his son Manila, who has not grown in the 30 years since Son of Godzilla, Larva Mothra, Rodan, Gorosaurus, Manda, Anguirus, and Kumonga, the giant spider from Son of Godzilla. Didn't die, he's alright. Baragon from Frankenstein vs. Baragon and Varan from Varan the Unbelievable are also technically there, but as I covered in the beginning, they don't do anything because their suits at that point were just in shambles.
They're there for support.
Exactly. They're there for support and to be on the poster. To face this combined force of like 10 kaiju, the Kilax call upon their secret weapon, King Ghidorah. The three-headed space dragon flies down to fight them and gets absolutely stomped, completely gang jumped. King Ghidorah gets mollywopped. There is no dancing around this.
It was embarrassing for King Ghidorah and frankly quite brutal.
Yeah.
So they just had King Ghidorah on lock up in space, like,
yeah, on standby.
Why did they, if they had King Ghidorah
why didn't they have King Ghidorah in the big rampage across the world?
Listen, now I just finished watching this film. I watched it within the last 24 hours. I walked into this podcast being like, that one was pretty good. And as the podcast goes on, I find more things because I start thinking about it. The implications have sat in my brain and percolated into dissent and objections. If they had King Ghidorah the entire time, and they're like, humanity has all of these dangerous monsters penned up on one island, why didn't they just point King Ghidorah at the cities of Earth and start unleashing them? Because it's like, the humans don't have mind-controlled technology. What are they gonna do? Unleash the kaiju to attack King Ghidorah and then deal with, like, oh, fuck, the kaiju are out? Like, I mean, the kaiju would have just turned around probably and attacked the cities. Like, I mean, now they reverse engineered the mind control technology and turned it against you.
Yeah. The United Nations now has an army of kaiju completely under their control directly because of the Kilax. And, like, the fact that they also kept King Ghidorah on standby, presumably under, like, another network of mind control separate from their master mind control device, like, as a just in case.
Unless King Ghidorah isn't mind controlled, actually. Like, and, in fact, it's just like, oh, I love destroying planets. You're going to let me do it for free? Oh, sick. Like, I don't know. I mean,
it's like the thematic opposite of the scene in Mothra v Godzilla where they beg Mothra for help. Like the Kilaaks come up to King Ghidorah and they're like, "We need your help destroying Earth," and he's just like, "I don't care about you." And it's like, "But Godzilla's there." Godzilla.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So I don't even want to call it the fight. The mollywhopping goes on. Godzilla curb stomping. There we go. Best word. Godzilla.
I mean, gosh, they ganged up and literally like curb stomped King Ghidorah. It was.
They're like stomping on his necks.
It really made King Ghidorah kind of look a bit pathetic. I'll be honest. Like King Ghidorah showed up and was like, "Ooh, shit," and then they just kind of took care of business. It was slightly anticlimactic.
Well, and the thing is, Ghidorah the three-headed monster, it takes 3 kaiju to take him down. That's a major plot point of the movie, is that Mothra, Godzilla, and Rodan have to come together to defeat this new threat. And then Invasion of Astro Monster, it's just Godzilla and Rodan who take him down. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, a little less impressive, but it still took 2 kaiju to take down this 1 kaiju. Mm-hmm. And then the climax of this movie is King Ghidorah is going to take on 10 kaiju, with 3 of the kaiju who previously kicked his ass also there.
Well, yeah, but it's not like I expected King Ghidorah to win. I was like, the odds are against him. I expected him to, draw a little bit of blood at least. Like, he's still stacked. It's not like every single kaiju on the roster is at Godzilla's level of might, like...
That's the thing, though.
There's not everybody is LeBron on this team.
That's the thing, though. The MVP for this fight, strangely enough, is Anguirus. King Ghidorah can't even take down Anguirus. Anguirus is the first to attack King Ghidorah. Like, out the gate, Anguirus is charging at the space dragon, and then he gets knocked away. And then Anguirus gets back up. Mm-hmm. Then King Ghidorah lifts him into the sky and drops him so hard he causes a landslide. And then Anguirus gets back up. King Ghidorah can't even defeat Anguirus before he's on the ground getting all 3 of his necks stomped on.
I mean, here's the thing. When Anguirus lost to Godzilla all those years ago, he took it personally. Yeah. And he vowed to get better. And he's been training and working. And he got a new coach team. And he's been putting in the time. And he showed us that on his match against King Ghidorah. Nobody expected him to have that dog in him, but he did. Yeah. He said, not only do I have that dog in me, I got a whole pack of that dog in me.
Anguirus doesn't tap.
No.
Anguirus keeps getting back up. And honestly, a lot more respect for Anguirus now. I could see why he is Godzilla's friend in these later movies.
A lot of respect for Anguirus, yeah. I lost a lot of respect for King Ghidorah and gave it all to Anguirus.
Yep. So Godzilla punches him, Gorosaurus kangaroo kicks him, Mothra and Kumonga cover him in silk, which is a death sentence in these movies. But the absolute most embarrassing thing is as King Ghidorah is getting his necks stomped on, Godzilla holds him up for Manila to blow an atomic smoke ring around his neck and finish him off.
Kevin, you failed to mention that what happened with the atomic smoke ring, right? Okay, so King Ghidorah is on the ground. Yeah. His last, undefeated head craning up towards the sky. The smoke ring Minizilla sends, it looks like it's going to hit, it's going to follow a logical path and go straight. And instead, it swoops and goes around the ring, changes trajectory and defies physics.
Like Manila's throwing a free throw.
Suddenly, yeah, and go around the neck, like a necklace, go around the neck of King Ghidorah.
Nothing but neck.
And defeat him that way instead of, just going straight the way. I didn't know you could throw it like a frisbee like that. I didn't know that's how that worked. But okay, sure, it's a telepathic smoke ring of atomic energy. I mean, it looked ridiculous, but it kind of looked cool.
No, I agree with you. That looked cool as hell. Also, Manila redemption arc, because he redeemed his stupid atomic smoke rings and actually made them look cool. But also, it's not even like a frisbee because it doesn't even stay like horizontal the whole time. It's like vertical, and then it falls over King Ghidorah's neck, and that takes him out.
Yeah, it flops.
Can you imagine a guy who you have gotten into no less than like 3 fights with? Like, you get into another fight, but that guy has not only brought all of his friends, but also during the beatdown holds you up so his son can get a hit in.
Yeah, that was pretty sick. The key with Manila is that he wasn't in it a lot. And when he was in it, he was being useful and not annoying. So I didn't mind him this time. He popped up and I was like, oh, this guy's here. Who brought... Actually, I actually do not, to be clear, I'm not that person that's like, there's a crying baby on this plane. Like, it's a baby.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't know what's going on. Its ears hurt. Leave it alone. Like, it's annoying, yes, but you must endure it.
Well, Manila is 30 years old in this movie.
Yeah, he's a grown man. But he's matured and he wasn't annoying anymore.
Yeah. God. So with... I also love how Manila, like, puts his foot on top of King Ghidorah's corpse. Like, he contributed more than a single atomic smoke ring. He's just like, yeah, we did it.
That was fun.
So, with Ghidorah slain, the Kilax revealed their secret weapon. A burning monster they call the Fire Dragon. This fast fireball attacks the kaiju and Captain Yamabe on his spaceship. It would be really cool if this was another dragon kaiju that was on fire, like a follow-up to King Ghidorah, but it turns out to just be a UFO that Yamabe shoots down. Hooray.
Also, I was quite startled when the flying object flew right through a building. Again, we are watching this. The date of watching this, it's just a few days after the anniversary of September 11th. So my TikTok feed had been giving me like a lot of 9/11 videos. And then a couple days later, watch a movie where unexpectedly somebody just throws a aircraft through a building. I was like, whoa! Didn't expect that in this film.
Mm-mm.
It was also very unrealistic because that tower did not collapse the way... I mean, it didn't collapse. It should, anyway.
Well, as you know, fire dragons can't melt steel beams.
Oh my god, do not.
It's time to finish the fight. Godzilla walks up to the Kilax base set into Mount Fuji and blasts it with his atomic breath, but the base's force fields protect it. You know what the force fields don't protect it from? Godzilla's foot. Godzilla kicks in the glass dome of the base, setting off a chain reaction that destroys the Kilax. Turns out, these aliens have 2 weaknesses: low temperatures and explosions.
I don't understand why they would have aimed habitat. Okay, this is like at the end of Signs, when it was the aliens are revealed to have a weakness to water. And then you're thinking about it later and you're like, if the aliens had a weakness to water, why did they go to a planet that is 70% water?
Mm-hmm.
This is maybe, if they have a weakness to low temperatures, most of the Earth, I mean, I guess they could have, again, what happened to their original planet? Like, is this their only recourse?
I believe their planet was like an asteroid in the asteroid belt. Like, they just kind of lived in a shitty situation
in between
from the
Mars and Jupiter.
Yeah.
Yes. The asteroid belt, famously hot.
Yeah.
What? It's cold out there. Wait a minute, what?
There's a single asteroid with like 50 volcanoes just in a 5-mile radius.
Son of a fuck.
So, and also, I love the concept of a force field that can protect from atomic breath, but not giant feet. Like, Godzilla's like, well, the atomic breath didn't work. I guess I'll just kick it, and that works.
Forget everything I said at the beginning about this being a cohesive film. That was just because I was...
This movie sweeps you up.
This is like, it swept me up. It's like a Michael Bay movie. It swept me up. I was like, wow, so exciting. You know, like my brain doesn't have time to process anything because it's taking in stimuli. And then I think about it and I'm like, why did they train drillers to be astronauts instead of training astronauts to be drillers? You know, that's.
And then Michael Bay comes into your bedroom and tells you to fuck off.
I don't listen. That's not That's not the point. That's not the point of that movie, to be clear. Like, there's a different, like, that's not the point. But I just mean that is a common criticism of that film. There are some Michael Bay movies that I really like, to be clear. It's just when we look at giant blockbuster films, I mean, Michael Bay is a king of giant blockbuster films.
Yeah.
Starring giant creatures in many of them. So, it's a good sort of, again, 1-to-1. Like, I poke at the MCU, I poke at Michael Bay. These guys can take hits. They've made a lot of money and they've had a lot of success and they've made some really great films. Just to be clear, I'm a professional hater in many ways, but I also will tip my hat. Ambulance slapped. That was a good fucking movie.
Well, at the end of this movie, the kaiju return to Monsterland to live out their peaceful existences. I presume the United Nations still has the ability to mind control them, so that's just a ticking time bomb, I guess. But as a helicopter flies over them, Godzilla and Manila wave goodbye to the camera, as we also get shots of each of the kaiju also doing a little thing to the camera as well, because this is supposed to be the last movie. This is the last hurrah.
Yeah,
Everyone say goodbye. We're not going to see them again until next year.
And then it wasn't the last hurrah.
And then it wasn't the last movie.
That's the problem with endings. If they make too much money, it's not an ending.
This is going to probably be the most controversial thing I'm going to say on this podcast.
Oh?
I did not care that much for Destroy All Monsters.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. This is one of the biggest Godzilla movies because it is the spectacle of, oh, there's all of the kaiju on here now. There's like 11 kaiju on the screen and they're all fighting. And it's like, cool. But the fight doesn't have any stakes or motivation. And it's King Ghidorah, this once incredibly badass villain, getting punked. And the villains are boring, and when the one villain, the mind-controlled Kyoko, is actually like stylish and cool and charismatic, and then she just gets relegated to narrative irrelevance halfway through the movie, that's boring.
Yeah.
I don't care at all about the main character, Captain Yamabe, the astronaut soldier. He doesn't have a character trait besides has a sister and good at laser drill. The kaijus, because they are mind controlled most of the time, they don't have agency. So it's like, all right, if it's not the heroes and it's not the villains and it's not the monster fights, what am I here for?
Yeah. I think the thing about this film that sort of, it seduced me because Ishiro Honda is a good director.
Yeah.
And this film, you're like watching it and you're like, this is cool. This is stylish. The effects look good. The camera work is great. Like, the acting is not bad. Like the acting's good. Like I said, the villain started out being like really cool and charismatic. Yeah, I like it. You're in it and you're like, okay, yeah, like this is great. Whatever. Like I'm with this. But then it's like you kind of keep thinking on it, and like and the film keeps going. I will say this. I started out like, cool, love this, wonderful, and it kept going, and I was a little bit like, But like I said, I walked into this podcast intending to be like, this was great, and then we kept talking about it, and I was like, no, actually, the direction was good, the directing was good, the cinematography was good, the effects were good, the sets were good, the costumes, but the script was really lacking. Mm-hmm. And that just goes to show you that everything really does come down to the script. Like you can make a solid movie out of a bad script. Like, I mean, I enjoyed that until I thought about it more. But if you don't have a good script, then it is really hard to make something that's really good because the story just doesn't work. Like, again, you're right. The stakes felt hollow. There was no character that I was attached or interested in. There was a lack of agency. And when we talk about, to be clear, audience, like when we talk about characters having agency or Mothra having agency or the mind-controlled woman having agency, like characters having agency, the ability to make choices and dig their own graves or dig themselves out of their own graves is integral to a story. Because what happened here is we just got a bunch of passive characters that didn't do anything. Like nobody was making choices. Characters need to be able to make choices for them to be compelling. If they're not making choices, then they're not like compelling real characters. You can't get invested in them. I mean, this is why, like, when you look back, and it doesn't mean that these characters need to not be coerced or not be in situations where their like personal autonomy and agency is being infringed upon by other characters. That's fine. Like, I totally okay, except that like then we didn't really explore the implications of any like we had villains that were imposing their will on other characters, but then these villains didn't really have like a lot going for them in terms of their own like choices and their own motivations. Like it felt like muddy, you know, because there's plenty of great thrillers that are all about one character exerting control over another character. I mean, psychological horror, there's a lot of that out there that's really great stuff, you know, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, this film hates women because this female character is going through it. Like, that's not necessarily how it works. But even the men aren't interesting in this film. Like, it's not just me, like, again, I'm not trying to get on my high horse here and be like, this film is misogynistic or whatever. Take that out of context and use that for a TikTok. We'll definitely get some engagement there. But I mean, like, none of the characters have any particular agency. Like you said, like, the main guy had nothing going for him other than, like, he could shoot a laser gun and he had a sister. Like, it was just, it felt hollow. I'm glad this isn't the end of the franchise because, good God, it's a styrofoam tombstone. You know.
Ooh, I'm writing that down. Styrofoam tombstone. That's. Did you come up with that?
Got it from fucking Spirit Halloween. Yeah, just now.
Nice.
The coffee kicked in, and I got articulate. I loaded up. But yeah, I mean, Jurassic Park is a better film because those characters have agency. Like, the dinosaurs have motivation. Their motivation is to hunt or to not. You know, the herbivores are just like living their life. But all of those characters in that film have clear goals and motivation, and they have the ability to make choices even when they are trapped into situations by their circumstances. And that's the thing, is like nobody here is really making choices or even properly reacting to the situation that they're in. Because you can tell interesting stories with fairly passive reactionary characters that are just going through something and trying, like, because I do think there is kind of, sometimes people hear, oh, your main character needs to be proactive. They need to be an active character. And then we have this backlash against characters that are more reactionary and passive. But it's like, there is a place for characters who do spend a lot of time just kind of reacting to their circumstances. There is stories of value to tell about characters that aren't choosing this situation that they're in, but are in fact just trying to get through this situation that they are in. I think it's a little bit harder to tell those stories, which is why you get a lot of advice about like, oh, don't do that, because it's harder to execute something like that. Because we tend to be as audience members, very judgmental. I mean, how many times have you watched a horror movie? A character has done something and you're like, that's stupid. You shouldn't have done that. That's illogical. It's like, well, you know, people can be pretty illogical. But yeah, this one, it's not good. It's not good leftovers. It doesn't, you need to eat it hot. It does not sit well.
Yeah. I think back. So first off, this movie begins with all the kaiju trapped on Monsterland. And it ends with them even more trapped on Monsterland, with at any point the United Nations being able to flip a switch and take away their autonomy. And that's the happy ending. But also, like, we keep coming back to Invasion of Astro Monster because, like, the cool ideas in this movie aren't even that original. They did it better in Invasion of Astro Monster. And
Which
we didn't even like Invasion of Astro Monster that much.
That's the thing that kills me. I'm like, how is this is somehow better and worse of a movie than Invasion of Astro Monster? That it vexes me. I will say this real quick. There was kind of an interesting so there's a narrator, of course.
Yeah.
And you don't really think about it that much. Like, sometimes the narrator is important in a movie, but especially in these older films where they are more keen to just kind of tell the audience information via narration, I don't think anything of it. But then at one point, what was it, like halfway or 2/3 of the way through the movie or something? The narrator is talking, and then the camera goes to this reporter guy who is reporting the news. And you're like, oh my God, the narrator has been this reporter the entire time? I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting a little bit, that the narrator like became a actual character. Like, oh, the reveal of the narrator is an actual character in this film. And it's not like there was really anything done with that, or that it expanded or continued or whatever. But I was like, there's a cool idea that came up and then went away.
Yeah. I do love the scene where all the monsters are, showing up, and then the reporter's just there announcing it like it's WWE. Like, Who is the first monster that's going to show up at Mount Fuji? Oh, here he is. It's Manila, followed by his father, Godzilla.
I mean, there are probably for these news events when there's kaiju activity, kaiju analysts, because you say WWE, well, it's an election year. In my head, I'm like, this is like a political analyst talking about, like,
I would vote for Godzilla for president.
I mean, Godzilla wasn't born in the United States. You can't vote.
Oh,
we have to.
You're right. Who's the American kaiju? King Kong? King Kong for president? No, King Kong also was not an American citizen. Shoot.
None of the kaiju were born in America. They can't run for American president, and you can't vote for anything outside of the American presidency because you're not a citizen of another country.
That's fair.
However, if we all work together, we can create a global government.
If we get the United Nations can still come back, folks. If we get them a mind-controlled giant monster army, we can get our moon base.
I wonder how the United Nations... Okay, I know that I said that, like, I feel like we don't see global government that much anymore. I mean, it's in The Expanse. How do you think they have elections? Like, how does that... I want to know how the United Nations global government in this film works.
I mean, apparently they train all their astronauts to be soldiers
exactly.
as well, because they order their astronauts on their moon base to come to Monsterland and come armed. And they're not even like, oh, we're not trained for that. They're like, okay, let's get onto our spaceship with our guns.
I mean, okay, a lot of astronauts, at least in America, I can't speak to other space agencies, but there is a good chunk of astronauts in America that do have military experience. That's one of the best ways to become an astronaut, is to join the militaries, particularly the Air Force or the Navy, and become a pilot with the Air Force or Navy. And then that's how you get into being an astronaut. So the concept of like a lot of the astronauts having military experience and thus the capabilities to like fight. Sure. If you have a global government and global peace, then where does a military fit into that? Like, how does your military operate? How would a peacekeeping force operate if you've been living in this age of peace and you don't have...
Well, I mean, they gotta send someone to Infant Island to kidnap Mothra.
Exactly. So the implications here of...
There's some dark implications in this movie that it does not interrogate, and it's maddening. It's baffling. So Kayla, what would you rate Destroy All Monsters?
I was prepared to come in and rate it like 3 stars. I feel like I'm gonna give it 2.5. Because I feel kind of a lot of complicated feelings about this movie, because while I was watching it, I was sucked into it and generally like, yeah, like this is cool, But I mean, the Ghidorah fight was underwhelming for sure. It's not like I wasn't. I don't want to be accused of being influenced by Kevin's input here. It truly was like I watched this movie and then I logged on to talk to Kevin about it. So really, I haven't had time to. This is me. You're getting me processing this movie in real time and realizing like. Oh, wait, it wasn't that good, actually. Like,
well, I mean, how many of these episodes have I had, like, a glowing idea of a movie and then you brought me down?
That's true.
Yeah, like I think during this podcast we influence each other because we force ourselves to think about these movies in ways that we didn't think about them while watching them, and I think that's very good, actually.
I mean, that's the point. That's so much of the point of the podcast and having two hosts.
I think I'm also going to give it 2.5. I think just like culturally, this movie is important. I think doing the big swing of let's get all of these different monsters, even if it's in a disappointing way, is still interesting. I think that what they were trying to do as a sort of mindless action movie. Like, it is cool when Captain Yamabe gets into multiple firefights and breaks into bases and, you know, steals hostages. And the issue with this movie is that it keeps undercutting itself.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a really cool movie here, but every time they present something cool, whether it's Kyoko as an antagonist or the big fight against Ghidorah or Captain Yamabe being an astronaut breaking into moon bases, there's always some decision made that undercuts the cool factor.
Well,
but at the same time, like the fight was more entertaining than like King Kong versus Godzilla's fights, where it was just very clearly two dudes in suits just throwing stuff at each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll do a 2.5 out of 5 for this movie as well.
I think the thing is, and we've talked on this podcast before, and this is also part of a larger discussion happening in the culture around art being political, art being mindless, art being propaganda, etc. You know, it being deep or it not being that deep, and the worldview that movies in particular have and are getting you to buy into. I do think that there is a version of this movie that is quote unquote mindless that would have worked. You know, like you could do the plot of this movie and sort of just do some very little edits to get us to not be complaining about like, well, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that this movie doesn't have to be Godzilla OG levels of getting you to think about shit. You know, it could have been a mindless, like, monster mash. It could have gotten you to buy into a simple worldview that didn't make you ask questions or trip up implications or whatever as much. And I mean, and I say as much because, again, there's still plenty of, like, you know, everybody's favorite propaganda movie is Top Gun. Like, that's Navy propaganda. Unequivocally, the Navy spends a lot of money and loans a lot of these planes out to the studio to make these Top Gun films because every time they do a Top Gun film, there is interest in naval recruitment, and the military has a lot of money and a lot of interest in looking cool to the American people so that it could keep getting a lot of money. I'm not here to argue with you on what the military budget should be, what the American military should be, on morality or political stances or anything like that. It is a fact that the U.S. military-industrial complex is interested in maintaining the general American opinion of it being good and cool. Like, that is 100% true. The military wants to look cool and keep the American citizens cool with giving it a ton of money. And the Top Gun movies help do that because the Top Gun movies make the Navy look badass as fuck. And the thing is, they're good movies. They're cool movies. Plane goes zoom. Tom Cruise is fun and awesome and cool and totally, don't worry about the Scientology, you know. But also, you know, there's a lot to unpack. Like, who is this unseen enemy? And, you know, like, there's still definitely things to, like, if you want to criticize Top Gun Maverick and its worldview, or Top Gun Maverick and its worldview and what it's saying and blah, 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 you can. But it's not, I think it sucks you in and has, like, it doesn't name its unknown assailant. So then you can't talk, like, it's harder to be like, you know, this foreign power, like, blah, 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 like Russia or China or whichever one, you know, Iran. Like, I mean, they are a little bit better about kind of like skating by without letting you dig into it. It doesn't undercut itself the way that this movie undercuts itself. And that's what kills me. Because I do think that there is kind of a version of this movie where they could have done it and we would have been like, okay, cool. You know, like, I'll roll with it. This is logical. Like, whatever. I'll accept this. But the problem is that there's just enough happening beneath the surface that I can't accept it.
We're going to have a much larger discussion, I think, about like the American military industrial complex's effect on Hollywood, especially once we get to the MonsterVerse Godzilla's way down the line.
Oh, yeah. We can't ever not talk about the American military with Godzilla because the American military created Godzilla. Like,
oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking about the American military throughout these movies, and we're going to be talking about them much more in later movies. But we're not to those just yet, because the next movie... oh, boy, the next movie. Kayla, what's the next movie we're watching?
I'm afraid. Why would you say it like that?
You'll see.
Next, we'll be watching All Monsters Attack, aka Godzilla's Revenge, 1969. Nice. Be sure to watch the Japanese language version, not the English version. If you liked this podcast, be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, leave a comment, and share with a friend. Follow us on social media. We got the links in the show notes. We also have a Ko-fi. You can support us there and get access to cool bonus content, like extra episodes and access to the private Discord, where you can talk with other geeks about Godzilla and all things Digital Kaiju. Check it out. Gorilla Whale is a production of Digital Kaiju Studios. It is hosted and produced by Kevin Carpenter and Kayla Knutson. Gorilla Whale has no official affiliation with Toho, Legendary, or any other companies associated with the Godzilla franchise. We thank you for watching along with us. Until next time, watch out for kaiju.
Watch out for kaiju.